good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak with you here today and kind of tell you a little bit about aviation in Louisiana and some of the exciting things that we have coming up, some of the exciting things that have kind of already happened here recently and over the past couple of years. I was enjoying the slideshow you had of all your previous speakers that you had here, and you've had some pretty notable folks come through here and speak to y'all. So I hope I can live up to expectations, at least educate you a little bit on what they have done, and hopefully give you an idea of some of the good stuff that we have coming up here. So I want to really cover three things with you today. One is just kind of give you an idea of what aviation is in Louisiana, what the aviation system looks like, what it kind of consists of. Next, to get into some of the funding scenarios and some of the important ways that the state currently invests in your airport system and in some of the aviation assets that we have around the state. And then I'll close today by talking about kind of an interesting topic that really has some nationwide impacts right now, and that's drones and advanced air mobility and some of the advanced aeronautics stuff that we see coming out from the national level and also from the state level. So in terms of our aviation system, right now our aviation system is made up of 68 public airports scattered throughout the state of Louisiana. 7 of those 68 airports provide commercial service or have access to commercial service: American Airlines, Delta, Southwest, other operators like that. And then the other 61 are general aviation airports. And those general aviation airports, what that means is that they are capable of supporting corporate and or local agricultural or small aircraft operations. So right now the department is actually underway with a Louisiana airport system plan, and this plan is done once every 10 years in conjunction with our statewide transportation plan, our highways, our big bridge plan, and then our freight movement plans as well. And we expect that system plan to be released sometime probably by midsummer, maybe late summer of 2025. And happy to report that some of the initial data and some of the initial stuff that's coming out of that system plan is already reflecting that our system is about ready to grow. So right now we have 68. By the end of that plan, we will have recognized 3 new additional airports that will be added to our already robust system. So it'll be 2 public heliports throughout the state and 1 airport over in Livingston, which will be the Livingston Executive Airport, which we hope will be coming online here by the end of 2025, definitely by the end of 2026. We're very excited to add those 3 new facilities again to our already robust plan. The 2 heliports that we're looking at adding are in very remote places within the state of Louisiana. One is in the city of Melville, and the other is in Ida. Again, both public use facilities, and just interesting story on the heliport up in Ida. So I had an opportunity to meet with the mayor up there a number of different times, and Ida sits right on the border, right off I-49 on the border of Louisiana and Arkansas, and they're about an hour to an hour and a half drive from any hospital type facilities. And the mayor, about 15 years ago that we were looking at, actually that little heliport saved the mayor's life out there, and that's what really had the local folks really get together, go out there, maintain this little heliport, repaint the heliport, put up any kind of safety lighting to make sure that the emergency service helicopters can get in and out of that facility. But they were able to fly in. It was like 1 in the morning, flew in, the mayor was having a heart attack, picked him up, flew him down to Shreveport, saved his life. Had that heliport not been there, that public heliport not been there, you know, the mayor of Ida, they may have been electing somebody new that year. But one of the really feel-good stories, and that's just one of many, many stories that we had the ability to see and hear from a lot of local officials scattered throughout the state. So just want to provide some statistics to you here regarding our system. So in terms of based aircraft, we have over 2,500 based aircraft at those 68 airports throughout the state of Louisiana. That is projected by 2050 to increase to over 4,000 based aircraft throughout the state. Now, a lot of those aircraft are going to be in terms of electric aircraft that you're hearing a lot about, in terms of advanced air mobility, and it'll be a lot of those that will be based mainly at public use airports, but there will be a lot based at new vertiports and or advanced air mobility facilities that may or may not be located on a public airport, maybe on a private airport, or it may be at a hospital that may be expanding some of the usages of their facilities there. But nonetheless, that has to work into consideration of how we plan with our local officials for how we invest in some of those facilities in terms of hangars, runways, taxiways, things of that nature. So adding that many will indeed increase operations accounts, but it'll also increase a lot of the safety considerations for how we have to look at planning for that system as well. In terms of passenger enplanements, so of interest, this is always a big question that we have to answer is, what does our state look like in terms of those passengers? Right now, New Orleans, being a medium hub airport within the state, is obviously the largest airport that we have in terms of commercial service. But right now, at the end of calendar year 2024, we project there will be about 14 million passengers that will be moving through our 7 commercial service airports throughout the state. That's a significant increase from the projection of just over 12 and a half of where we thought it was going to be based on our last system plan. So our airports and a lot of our planning efforts are making significant strides in terms of getting those passengers in and out of Louisiana. Again, by the year 2050, which is what our plan looks at, we expect those passenger numbers to exceed 26 million. So they're going to almost double by the time 2050 is here. And again, that brings with that a lot of different planning considerations and where investments should and should not go in terms of your public facilities throughout the state. Next, I just wanted to get into just the number of operations, since we've kind of talked about that a little bit. So in total, Louisiana airports host 1.5 million operations annually, every year. So if you kind of break that down on a per day basis, that's about 4,000 flights a day that take place at just airports in our state. And that's just a small fraction of the number that happens all across the U.S. on a daily basis. So the bigger question is, okay, you have the operations, you have the statistics, you have all the passenger numbers. So how do you fund? How do you plan to go about paying for all these different improvements? Well, right now, that is something that our office is working through. So November 1st is the deadline for airport applications to come into our office to be considered for putting together a list that we will take and present before our Joint Transportation Committee in March of next year for them to vote on where essentially those funds will be invested. So we had over 550 applications this year alone, which is double the applications that we had over the last 2 years just for airport improvements. In total right now, we have over 860 applications on file, and we have a backlog of about $1.3 billion worth of aeronautical and aviation needs and airport infrastructure projects that we are considering throughout the state. So currently, we have about $20.5 million is what we are expected to essentially spend and prioritize, and that is just state funding. So the aviation trust fund, or the aviation appropriation that we use, is based off, it's the only source of revenue that comes into the transportation trust fund, which is specifically to be used for airport improvement and airport infrastructure projects. So that $20.5 million is used primarily to go out and garner leverage for federal funding that comes into the state. So that could be by the way of FAA, Federal Aviation Administration funding, Federal Economic Development Administration funding, or anything that is considered non-state funding. So if an airport is able to go out and garner 90% or more of any for any airport project, then that project comes through our program to be considered for the remaining matching funds to get that completed. So right now, again, that funding stands at about 20.5. About a week and a half ago, happy to report that the governor just signed into law a new bill that came out of the 2024 special session, which many of you, I'm sure, were part of or watching and tracking. So House Bill 21, which eventually became Act 15 of that special session, is specifically dedicated towards the aviation appropriation and essentially how that estimate for the revenue that is derived from the sale of taxes on aviation fuel, both jet fuel and aviation gasoline in the state, that sets up the model for how that fuel is to be estimated. So what it does essentially is it now directs that model back to looking at federal data. So now we will be looking at the Energy Information Administration, which specifically identifies fuel consumed within the state of Louisiana, again, both from jet fuel and from aviation gasoline. And those figures are all reported by the individual refineries and folks that are picking that fuel up, taking it to airports, putting it in those tanks to be put in an aircraft wing. And then the dollar amount that's used, so right now, aviation gasoline across the southern region of the U.S. is anywhere from $5.25 to $5.61 a gallon for jet fuel. So all that goes into the model, goes into the formula, and then that is essentially where we generate the estimated number for what the revenue to the state of Louisiana is. That revenue is then dedicated to this aviation appropriation, and that is the money that we use, again, to go after and leverage federal funds. So this year, we are expecting that number to be closer to $44 million when it's all said and done. The Revenue Estimating Committee meets this Thursday at 9 a.m., so we'll see what the estimate comes out to be at that point. But we will be building a program anywhere from 20.5 to that $44 million, and then we'll see what that what that looks like come March of next year. The initiative behind that bill was driven by the Louisiana Airport managers and associates. So they were the ones that were successful in getting the author of the bill, went and did all the lobbying, got it through. And now that it's at where it's at now, or since the governor has signed it, now it falls upon Department of Transportation and Department of Revenue to essentially negotiate what that cost is going to be based on the number of different data sources that is out there. So we anticipate with that additional increase of funds from the state, there is now a 2-year program that was passed by Congress last year. So when they passed the Federal Aviation Administration Reauthorization Bill, they included a number of different aspects in there and included, and you're well aware of this, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and IIJ, the Jobs Act, had about $2 trillion in there. Well, FAA received a number of that, of those funds, and we are already seeing that play out with a number of those funds already coming into the state. We just had one released here on Friday of last week that was announced over in the Lafayette area. But we anticipate with that extra money, we'll be able to go and leverage about $400 million more of FAA money to bring into our state and into our airports for improvements at terminal buildings, runways, building hangars, improving our fuel systems, and also improving the overall aviation safety of each individual facility as well. So with that extra money, that will allow the state dollar to go much, much further. In addition to that, the FAA, Congress also told the FAA that they are going to change the match. So typically those FAA grants come in at 90-10, so 90% from the Fed, state requirement is the remaining 10%. Now that match has actually gone down on the state side, so it's gone from a 90-10 to a 95-5. So our dollar even stretches that much further, again, for the next 2 years, and we are going to be extremely aggressive at going after every federal dollar that's out there. In addition to that, the first year of the bipartisan infrastructure law, with the funds that were invoked or inserted by Congress back in 2021, those will now start expiring for those airports across the nation that have not utilized those yet. We anticipate that number to be probably closer to $1 billion by the end of June when those funds will be released. And we're going to help and make sure that our airports in the state of Louisiana are well positioned to be able to go after any of those extra dollars that are out there and hopefully pull them in from other FAA regions and make sure that we spend them right here in Louisiana. So on a funding standpoint, I also want to cover economic development. So economic development, obviously airports are major economic engines for all of our communities, both large and small, throughout the state. And many times without an airport in a local community, you may not have a business or you may not have an industry that wants to locate to those towns or to that parish in the state because they don't have a way of getting their corporate people in and out. Many times it's said that when Walmart is considering where they're going to put a new store or where they're going to consider putting a new store, if there's not a 5,000-foot runway within a 30-minute drive distance of where they want to put that airport, they may not relocate there. Not saying they won't, but it makes it a lot better chance that a Walmart will put a store in that local community because they have a way of getting their executive folks in and out of that community quickly. So right now we have a number of different economic development projects going on around the state. Probably the first and foremost that everybody has seen is the one up in Richland Parish with the Meta Data Center that's going to be coming into the northern part of the state. That is going to bring hundreds of jobs into that community up there. And right now our office is working with a couple of airports up in that region to be able to help support the inundation of the travel and the transportation needs that are going to have to take place up there. That airport may need runway extensions, may need expansion, just to be able to handle some of the corporate activity alone that is going to take place in the northern part of the state. Additionally, in the Acadian region, Acadian Regional Airport in New Iberia has a major effort going on right now. They have a primary tenant down there, Aviation Exteriors, that brings in aircraft from all over the world. 767s, 777s, and 787s. Further, they also have contracts with United and Southwest Airlines, and what they do is they strip down airplanes and completely repaint them. Right now they have 2 large hangars down there at that airport where they'll bring in an airplane, a couple weeks later they bring it back out, fully repainted with a whole new livery and scheme on them. What we're doing now, and in partnership with our Louisiana Economic Development, with the Governor's Office, and with the Iberia Parish Port Authority down there, they're now going to be building a brand new free-span hangar, which will now hold 3 737s all at one time, because that company is now expanding their efforts and has essentially moved from Jacksonville, Florida, to Louisiana to base their headquarters here now, because the state is standing behind those kind of private investments and those kind of job creation opportunities. So hopefully that will be online here within the next 2 years as well, which would be fantastic. Finally, just want to cover the flight training aspect of economic development. So over the past few years, we have heard of pilot shortages, mechanic shortages, aircraft mechanic shortages across the board. We now have a lot of our aviation universities and a lot of our community colleges and technical colleges that are taking up that effort in creating new programs and creating new economic development type programs to be able to train our students and to keep our students here in Louisiana rather than having those students go off and work in places like Houston, Dallas, or Atlanta where a large portion of the work is. Now those students will be able to stay here in the state after they get done doing their flight training and their mechanic training and be able to work at some of our airports right here once we get these maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities built, and once these companies, like the ones like AVEX, will start taking up root and start expanding those business and job opportunities. So finally, I want to close with talking about the new entrants, or I guess what we're kind of calling at DOTD right now, advanced aeronautics. And that's kind of the buzzword for the moment. And so we'll give full transparency here. I am not the drone expert, and I don't claim to be the drone expert, but I've got those experts that work in my office. So if you have any questions specific to drones, I'll do my best here today to try and answer those. But we can definitely give you the specific answers that you may be looking for. But I'm sure you have heard terms like vertiports, you've heard terms like advanced air mobility, unmanned, uncrewed, drones. So all that falls, in our opinion, under advanced aeronautics. And it's such a wide-ranging, such a gray area right now. And the reason for that is because the FAA and Congress still have not passed the required laws or the required oversight to be able to handle a lot of that new technology and where that new technology is coming from. Industry is ready. Industry is ready to put those vehicles out there, put them to work. Aircraft electrification is going to be a big, big thing, especially for the state of Louisiana. Right now, down at home at Terrebonne Airport in the Gulf Coast Center of Excellence, they have been working on this for the past 10 years, really trying to bring up and develop a drone-ready electrical aircraft site at the airport down there. As of last week, the governor just signed a new executive order, supporting the development at the home at Terrebonne Airport and in that region to be able to support unmanned activity and the development and testing of those kind of facilities. We have companies like Bristow and PHI, Petroleum Helicopters International, that is looking at utilizing some of these new pieces of technology in unmanned equipment. They're looking at upgrading helicopters that they're already using, going offshore, that are delivering personnel and equipment to some of the rigs out there in the Gulf. In the future, and we don't know when, but sometime within the next 20 to 30 years, you're going to be seeing these helicopters that will be retrofitted with being able to operate electrically and unpiloted, be able to move equipment for sure to these offshore rigs, which should hopefully bring down the cost, operations of some of those helicopter operations. But the future for unmanned stuff is extremely exciting. In terms of DOTD, what we're doing, and Ms. Dilly had mentioned this in the introduction. So I currently sit on the Louisiana Advanced Aviation and Drone Advisory Committee. So this was a committee that was developed about 6 years ago. It's a 15-member committee. And I invite all of you to our next meeting. It'll be January the 15th at the State Capitol in House Committee Room 1 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so this committee, the thrust and the model that we operate off of is really how should the state look at these new technologies and these new entrants into the national airspace system. Right now, our thrust is to be able to work with the FAA and to be able to advise the FAA on how those new entrants would impact operations within the state of Louisiana. And there's a number of different initiatives out there that we're looking at. Probably the biggest one to get by is going to be the electrification piece. And that is, it sounds simple to be able to put a charging station at an airport to recharge your electric aircraft that you might be flying from, say, Baton Rouge to Marksville, Louisiana, and back again for business, right? Well, how about when you have a company that wants to bring in 100 of those aircraft, and they want to start using those aircraft to start moving people from home in Louisiana to New Orleans? How about for the Super Bowl? When you have all these executives that fly in, well, when there's no space at New Orleans Lakefront, when there's no space at the new Livingston Executive Airport, no space at Port of South Louisiana Executive or Louisiana Regional, when all that is filled up, you could have these executives start flying to outer airports and start utilizing some of these advanced air mobility vehicles to get into downtown New Orleans. That is going to take a lot of charging, and that goes back to the power needed at some of these airports to be able to properly recharge these vehicles. So that's really going to be the biggest consideration. And the second one on that is going to be, how do you protect the rest of the equipment and people on the ground? So we have all seen the stories out there of some electrical vehicles that when they start on fire, it's almost impossible to put out those vehicle fires, and you can see how they're damaging roadways and pavements and things of that nature. Put that vehicle now on an airport and on an air side, and how do you deal with that? So it's going to be, the same kind of concepts, water, foam, things of that nature, but you want to make sure these things are parked far enough away to where they're not catching buildings and, somebody else's aircraft on fire as well. So there's a number of different considerations that we are looking at. We're working with the State Fire Marshal's Office. The Louisiana Drone Advisory Committee is working with all those different entities as well to ensure that the safety of the public comes first, and then the economics and the efficiencies of operations, always come second. So with that, again, I thank you for allowing me to come and just kind of give you a brief insight as to what's going on in aviation today. And I guess I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Early on, you talked about the estimates or the projections for the number of passengers reaching 26 million by certain...
By 2050.
By 2050.
Yes, ma'am.
How does that jive, though, with what we know about our out-migration problem? I mean, we're losing population, so how do you reconcile the increase versus number of people right now who are leaving the state?
Yes, ma'am.
And Brad, would you repeat the question for everyone?
Oh, sure, okay. Yeah, so the question was, early on in my presentation, I had mentioned about by 2050, our aviation system plan is identifying that our passenger throughput at our commercial service airports will essentially almost double, go to about 26 million, by that time. And how do we reconcile that with population data and population movements in or out of the state? And that's a fantastic question. Right now, what we do is we rely on the consultants looking at that and putting in the different multipliers into all that. And of course, the last data that we have is from the 2020 census, so that is what everything is essentially built from. The next time they're going to be able to update that will probably be 2030 time frame. Reconciling that is going to be tough. A lot of that data, though, is also used and compared to what the FAA forecasting information shows as well. So what the consultants do is they're taking in the actual population data from those metrics, and then they're bringing in a lot of the FAA metrics as well, putting those together, and then that's what essentially they develop that forecast off of. So, but it is also our job, I think, as the public, to be able to look at those numbers and go, wait a second, this really doesn't jive, this doesn't match up. Do we need to take a closer look at that? And that's one of the things that we're doing right now, is taking a look at that data to make sure that the data they are collecting and using is accurate enough to draw those conclusions out for 30 years. Yes, ma'am.
Is the aviation money at the federal level in the infrastructure bill, is it protected from this change in administration that is coming right now? Because there's been a big push at the federal level to get that money out the door. And it doesn't seem like that money is going to be able to get out the door. Am I wrong? So is there, I guess there's protection for it.
Yeah, so the question is, the federal money, the AIP money, is it protected during an administration change at the national level? So it depends on the flavor of money, I guess is the best way to answer that. So what you have right now, the two primary pots of money we work with is the AIP, or Airport Improvement Program money. So that money comes directly from the Federal Aviation Trust Fund. That's where they collect fuel taxes, all across the nation. So that money is dedicated to AIP. The bipartisan infrastructure, or the IIJA money, is general fund money. So when that was appropriated to the FAA to be used for airports, yes, it's dedicated to airports, but it is general fund in nature. So at any time, if that money is not needed, it can be yanked back. And that's what we're seeing, or have the potential to see here by the end of June of next year, is any airports, and even airports in our state, that have not utilized or have not gone to grant with that IIJA money, that money is now put at risk for going back to the federal government and either being wiped off the books or being used for other purposes. Could be aviation, may not be aviation, but because it is in two different pieces of legislation, that's what makes that money a little tricky. So from a statistical standpoint, so when that bill was passed, you have different models of money within that appropriation as well. So for our airports that are in the federal system or federally funded in the state of Louisiana, about 35 to 36 million a year is what our airports receive from an entitlement standpoint through that IIJA program. To date, all of our air carrier commercial service airports have either put that under grant or have identified where that money needs to go for improvements. The challenge that we're seeing is the 61 general aviation airports. Not all of them have received a grant yet, and not all of them have identified that. So we do anticipate that by the end of June, we may very well have some money available that we want to put other airports in a position to be able to go ahead and compete for that once it does become essentially discretionary money at the end of the day. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
What are the conflicts at the federal level with the drone legislation that you see? What would be the top couple of conflicts that are currently trying to be resolved?
Okay, so the question is, what are the top conflicts at the federal level in terms of drone legislation or drone guidance?
Security. There's a big problem right now in New Jersey, New York.
Yes, sir. So the easy answer to that, and probably the biggest one, is the utilization of the airspace. And that's really the biggest question that comes down to what a lot of states are asking, and Louisiana is no different. We have asked that question very early on when the drones started flying. So when you think about it, the Federal Aviation Administration will tell you, so they own the airspace, you know, from the top of the blade of grass all the way up to infinity, and that's really kind of part of the argument right now is who truly owns that airspace above your house. You know, you own your 1 acre piece of property. You know, how far up do you own, or do you own it at all? It really just comes down to a utilization standpoint, not necessarily an ownership standpoint. So there's a lot of data out there about, you know, drones fly up to 400 feet and below, and that, you know, normal aircraft will fly at 500 feet or should fly no lower than 500 feet unless you're in a category like helicopters, mosquito spraying, something like that, but you operate at those levels 500 feet and above. From a Louisiana standpoint, what we looked at was, is there a possibility of designating or developing drone highways, for lack of a better term, within the state? One of those being from home in Terrebonne Airport out to the Gulf of Mexico. Because what you don't want to have is you don't want to be flying from station to station to get out here. You want to be able to have one way out, go do your testing, and come back. So the FAA is very clear that we have found, and this is in a letter from the General Counsel of the FAA, as far as developing some sort of highways or controlling in any way operations within airspace, that is preempted. So states are not allowed, at least right now, currently by law, to pass any laws or pass any legislation or rules or policy which impacts the use of airspace. So drones, by definition, at the FAA level are considered aircraft. So they all have the registration numbers. They all have, identification assigned directly to them. So that's why when you have an operator operating an aircraft, it would be the same as, you know, trying to go after somebody operating a normal aircraft in the left seat of a helicopter or an airplane. But that's probably the biggest issue out there right now, is just the sovereignty piece of who controls the airspace. And right now, the FAA says we do, we control that, and the states do not, you know, control the access to it, I guess, for lack of a better word. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Great presentation. My name is Preston Castillo. I'm a member of the State Board of Education and also work with the school here in Baton Rouge, Helix Aviation Academy, K-12 school located at the Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport. And so one of my questions is that you spoke a little bit about workforce and pipeline and the shortage of aviation professionals. You spoke about it at the college level. So one question is, where do you see things going in terms of developing that pipeline at the K-12 level? Obviously, all that you said today is something we could share with all of our students at our school because it's important information. And then the second part of the question, you spoke a lot about funding. Are there funding opportunities, particularly at the K-12 level, that might support such an endeavor?
Yes, sir. And Helix Aviation Academy, fantastic school, by the way.
Thank you.
So, yeah, congratulations to everything you've been able to do out there so far. and we hope to see it continue to grow. So on the education standpoint, yes, right now what we're seeing is a lot of effort that is going into the college level in terms of developing new programs. We are starting to see, however, at the local levels, specifically the high school levels, a lot of drone specific type of programs starting up. I know there's probably a handful around the Baton Rouge area. I think there are 2 up in the Alexandria area and 1 or 2 up in the Shreveport area that I'm aware of that are looking at developing a high school curriculum to be able to handle drone operation, to be able to work students through being able to be certified to be drone operators as well, which is, that is absolutely fantastic. So in terms of what the state is doing, so we're still continuing to look at how we as a state can weigh into that and help local communities do that. I can give you an example from a different state that is extremely successful right now. The state of Oklahoma has done that, where they are now in, I think their program that they've developed, they're in over 135 of their high schools throughout the state of Oklahoma right now. And what they did was they partnered with Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, or AOPA as it's known. And so AOPA actually has a specific elementary, grades, middle school, and high school curriculum that they've already developed that is on their website, and that we can work through our regional representative to try and put that into high schools. A lot of it becomes a manpower and resource issue from a state standpoint, but we are looking at that. We are trying to figure out how we can bring that into our program and actually start getting out to schools such as yours to help implement some of those kind of curriculums. I apologize. Your second question, I know you said about funding.
Yeah, you mentioned resources.
Yes, sir.
We're a regular public K-12 school on one hand, but we hired, for example, a certified flight instructor who's teaching ground school this year. So that's above and beyond what you'd imagine a regular school would have.
Yes, sir.
So we're always looking for funding opportunities. We spend a lot of time talking about that on the front end. So always curious, always advocating for the school.
If I could create a scholarship program right now for the state, I would absolutely do it. And that is something that we've looked at really over the past 10 years. A lot of it, I think, is just getting the verbiage right. So in state government, everything is very siloed, and we're trying to move away from a lot of that. And I think we're making some good strides in those efforts. For us, when you bring in the money part of it, that's where things tend to get a little complicated, especially on an operational standpoint. But from what I've seen in other states and what we're trying to adopt as far as our model, the successful states all have some sort of scholarship program. And again, by Virginia, Oklahoma, I think Alabama has one. New Mexico, I believe, is also another state that has that. And so when we look at those models, the way they are set up right now is they offer scholarship opportunities primarily to teachers and to classrooms right now. So a teacher, if they will be willing to develop a curriculum right now to teach aviation or aerospace specific curriculum over a week, 1 week, they can then apply to those state programs $200, $300, $400 for funding to be able to procure the materials required in order to actually teach that course. And that is where we're seeing a lot of success from how other states are doing it. And that's kind of one of the models that we want to adopt here in Louisiana, because we think that will be very successful here in the state. Again, it just gets down to that. How do you transfer the dollar from here to here, publicly, and making sure that that's all transparent for the public to see. And those are that's the challenge that we're working through right now. But I think we're going to get there. Hopefully we'll get there in the next 2 years. But I'd like to be a part of that before I retire, for sure. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Meta project in Richland Parish. That is within 20 miles of the Poverty Point World Heritage Site. Can you foresee the development of a full-scale commercial airport up there so that people can access Poverty Point boys?
Good question. What I could foresee is the expansion of existing facilities and the improvement of existing facilities. For example, Monroe Regional, I could see state investment and federal investment, particularly going to that airport to improve upon the facilities they already have and to ensure that operators and/or passengers could easily and efficiently go through there. We are also looking at the Rayville, John H. Hooks Memorial Airport in Rayville, Louisiana. That is one that we have been in recent talks with about expanding and improving upon their base model up there as well to ensure easy and efficient operations. Outside of that, those are the only two airports that have contacted us and that we're in talks with right now. In terms of installing a new commercial service airport, that's something that could potentially be looked at, but probably not feasible, being that we have the Monroe Airport and then you have Jackson right across the river over there, which would both support that area. And then of course you have Alexandria International just to the south. And Alexandria and Monroe, neither of those airports right now are operating at full capacity. And what I mean by that is they can still take on a number of different operations before anybody would ever see any delays out of either of those airports. That would be the first thing we would do.
But if Mark Zuckerberg wants his own airport and offers to pay for it, will we build it?
Mr. Zuckerberg wants his own airport. We would definitely work with him to develop such a facility in that area. Yes, sir.
Can you give a breakdown of a large airport like New Orleans versus a small local airport? How much of their cost is coming from the federal government versus the state government versus what they're actually making themselves?
Sure, no, good question. So we can start with New Orleans International. We'll start with that. So in terms of what the airport looks like, obviously you have a massive terminal, a $2 billion terminal that was just completed down there in that area. That terminal is already at capacity, and they're already looking at the possibility of having to add on to that terminal just because of the activity that is being generated down there. In terms of financial stability from the federal government, so because of the classification of New Orleans International, they're considered a medium hub, which has nothing to do with what the airlines consider as a hub. It's an FAA definition, mind you, based on the number of passengers rolling through there. But they are currently at a 75-25 share. So unlike any other airport that we have in the state, 75% of that investment comes from the federal government, and then the airport is required to put up the remaining 25%. So of that remaining 25%, the airport comes to us for 10 of that 25. So for every project they do that is funded by the federal government, the New Orleans International Airport still has to invest about 15% of their own local funds to get those projects put in place.
How about the operating budget?
The operating budget, I don't have specific numbers on what it costs to operate New Orleans International. I'd have to put you in touch with some of their executives down there. In terms of just maintenance costs, I know that it's at least over $1 million a year, and the only reason we know that is because historically we have had a program that the commercial airports could apply to our office for a match to some of the maintenance money that they have to put out. And that's taking care of pavements, taking care of lights, all the safety related stuff. On the other end of that spectrum, some of our smaller airports that have smaller runways, no terminals, just kind of the basic amenities out there. In terms of maintenance, that could cost them anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a year. In terms of the federal investment into those airports, it's a 90-10. So 90% coming in from FAA, and then they would apply to the state for the remaining 10%.
So is your organization more concerning investment or investment and operating costs?
So only investment into infrastructure. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, we do not fund, DOTD does not fund operational costs for any of the airports in the state at all. For the state, we do not invest in any operational costs. That's correct.
Okay, I think we are just about near the end. Maybe one more question, if anyone has one.
Yes, sir.
I did get, there'll be 1 p.m. sometime in January, House Committee will
The drone
repeat that, that would be great.
Yes, sir, no problem.
But a more serious question, and this is really kind of would any of the people who and the systems that you're in charge of have knowledge or either investigative ability or responsibility regarding the kind of incident that happened when ultimately we shot down some weather would any of those people have responsibility or be asked questions if that same kind of thing had been happening in our area?
Yes, sir. So on the drone committee, first and foremost, it's Wednesday, January the 15th in House Committee Room 1. And that's at 1 o'clock. And as an addition to that, if you are, for any of those that are interested, so on our DOTD website, www.dotd.la.gov, /aviation, you can get to our website. And there's actually a button on there that you can use to upload your information if you wish to be put on the automatic notification list for any future meetings. So I highly encourage you to do that as well. In terms of the investigation part, that is one of our charters in state statute, is investigation of aircraft accidents, incidents, things of that nature. So we have not had to use that charter for a number of years. But when we do have an airport inspector or a safety inspector on staff, which we're currently lacking that right now. We had our last one leave about a year ago, and we have not been able to replace them. But that would be under the auspice of their job duties to go and inspect those kind of incidents and to help and assist the FAA, any local authorities, and or the NTSB in securing those kind of sites and assisting in any way possible with the investigation.
Okay, if I could be allowed, before this press club, I would like to say as a fact that in this phone are pictures eerily similar to the things we shot down that I tried to report that weekend, and we later found that we had been. But I just couldn't get it tonight. If you would like to look at it, I would love to show that to you.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to talk with you about that offline. Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, we appreciate it. And just a reminder that this is our last meeting through the holidays, and if you haven't paid your dues yet for next year, John would really appreciate it if you would do that.
You heard me.